A young man ran into the police station, gasping for breath, his clothes drenched in sweat. Spotting an officer at a desk, he rushed forward. "Hurry! A murder," he blurted out. The officer straightened. "Who are you? What murder?" The man, still panting, took the water the officer handed him. "My name is Arjun. I'm a night security guard at a bank ATM nearby." "Did you witness the murder?" the officer asked, eyes narrowing. "No," Arjun shook his head. "But I know it happened." "How? How can you be so sure there's been a murder if you didn't see anything? Did you do it?" Arjun looked the officer in the eye and said, "I can't explain how I know. And if I try, you won't believe me." The officer studied him for a moment before exhaling. "Fine. Let's go." They got into a patrol car, and Arjun started guiding the officer toward the location. As they drove, the officer spoke. "You have time until we reach the place, about 15 minutes. Use it wisely. Explain everything. Let me decide whether to believe you or not." Arjun took a deep breath. 2 years ago, I lost my job due to the recession and ended up working as a night guard. My post was near a bus stop. Every day at 7 p.m., my shift would start. I carried a radio and a flask of hot coffee to keep me awake and alert. Every night at 11 p.m., a company bus would arrive, dropping off employees. Among them was a girl who always walked home alone. She was quiet, focused, someone who didn't waste time and money on small things. She intrigued me. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I followed her. The cop listening to the story turned to me with suspicion. Sensing the tension in the air, I quickly clarified, "You might think I'm a stalker, but let me tell you, I'm not. Every guy who's interested in a girl is naturally curious about her whereabouts." As I followed her, she sensed it, got scared, and walked faster. When a streetlight went out, she froze. She closed her eyes and started whispering, "Please," over and over again. I stepped ahead and turned on my torch. "You need some light?" I asked. She didn't respond. I told her she didn't have to be scared, then walked ahead. After a moment, she followed, keeping a safe distance. The next night, a thought struck me: what if the streetlight was still broken? It would be pitch dark, and she'd be afraid again. With that concern, I decided to check. I was right. She had stopped at the same spot, hesitating, too scared to move forward. And the same thing happened. I lit the way again. And the night after that. Eventually, it became routine. I would walk ahead with my torch, my radio playing old Muhammad Rafi songs, and she would follow from a distance. She never spoke. One day, I had to leave town for a family emergency. When I returned, she was not to be found in the bus stop. I waited, but she didn't arrive. As the bus left, I turned back to leave. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. When I turned around, she was there. I felt relieved and happy to see her. As I walked toward her, shining my torch, she suddenly collapsed. I rushed to her and asked, "Are you all right?" She gestured for me to stop. Looking at me with surprise and happiness, she said, "You? How can you?" I said, "What happened? Are you all right?" She looked anxious. "I need your help," she said. Her mother was in the hospital, needing urgent surgery. She asked me to collect money from her apartment and bring it to the hospital. I agreed. "But please, don't ask any questions right now," she added. I agreed, though my mind was full of questions. At the hospital, I deposited the money as she instructed and told her mother that Svati, her daughter, was away on business. Then I returned to Svati. "Now can I ask my questions?" I said. She nodded. "But first, let me tell you about myself. moved to Bangalore with her mother for her studies and later found a job. Life was fine, until her mother fell ill. Medical expenses drained their savings. Walking home alone at night scared her, but my torch and the songs on the radio gave her comfort. Then she said something that shook me. On March 22nd, I left work as usual, but you weren't there. I waited for a few minutes, then assumed you weren't coming that day. So, I started walking toward my apartment. Before entering the dark street, I paused for a moment. As I stepped forward, a speeding car hit me. She looked at me and said, "I died that night." I stared at her. "That's not funny." She extended her hand. "Touch me." I reached out. My hand passed right through hers. I fell to the ground in shock. "I've been trying to ask for help," she said, "but no one could see me, except you." I was terrified. I ran back to my room, gasping for breath. "Please leave," I finally managed to say. She started crying. Even though she was a ghost, I couldn't stand seeing her cry. I took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry for reacting like that. I'm sorry I wasn't there that night." What happened next? The officer driving the car stopped abruptly. He looked at me with a serious expression. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped. "Do you think I'm a fool? How dare you waste my time with this nonsense?" I sighed. "Sir, I told you before, you wouldn't believe me if I told you the truth. But there's one more thing she told me. And that made everything clear." The officer frowned. "What is it?" "She told me I would find her mobile phone in this car gloves box." I opened it. There it was. I turned to the officer. "Why did you do it?" His face went pale. "What are you talking about?" Suddenly, Svati appeared in the back seat. The car veered wildly. The officer struggled for control. His seatbelt tightened around his throat. "Confess now," I said, "or stay silent forever." Choking, he gasped out the truth. He admitted that he had been drunk while driving. He had hit her, hidden the crime, and bribed someone to dispose of her body. Later, Svati possessed him in court, making him confess publicly. He was sentenced to 10 years. Afterward, she appeared to me one last time. "Why was I only visible to you?" she wondered. I already knew the answer. The torchlight.